All right, so today I want to talk about this tweet from Faith Goldie, and basically she goes on to, I mean, she's talking about a global news story, but anyway, she goes on to say someone posts government issued statistics about Canada's ongoing demographic replacement, and now racism and hate crime experts are getting involved. My guess, StatsCan is going to start canceling the real numbers because facts are racist, and the reason why I wanted to make a video about this is because this is the path we're headed on in Canada, that we can't talk about facts about the difference between the races when it makes one particular one look bad unless it's whites. I'll throw that caveat in there, unless it's whites, because then we're going to talk about it as much as we can. But the whole aspect of this is that there's a massive political divide nowadays, that the clashing and the tensions between the two sides. I mean, there's arguably more than two sides, but the two main sides, at least at the very least, the people that want more government involvement in everything and the people who want less, let's just put it as that. Um, the tensions are at pretty much as high as they've been in a long time, and people, I always hear these people talk, and like I always mention this, people are always, well, what's causing this? Well, what's causing this? And you always hear inevitably these people say, well, both sides are equally as responsible for this, and we need to work together. And I just laugh and laugh when I hear that, because they're not paying attention. One of the big reasons why I'm so critical of the left, and why a increasing number of moderates and even former lefties are critical of the left, is that the left has gone completely off the deep end, and the right hasn't. The right has came to the left on a lot of issues, and where has the acknowledgement of that been? It hasn't been acknowledged. People think that conservatives are still the same as they were 20, 30 years ago. I mean, even though they're not, the studies and the polls don't show that. But the left has gone way to the left, way to the left, and yet no one's critical of that. No one's saying, "Well, hey, I think maybe the big reasons that the left came way to the left." Like, you don't think that that's part of the reason? So I mean, it's just very, very bad. And Canada's pretty much, aside from somewhere like Sweden or Germany, pretty much the epitome of what's wrong with modern, I guess, Western society. Basically, that you can't talk about facts if they make one race look bad, assuming they're not whites, because then we're going to talk about it a lot. But the whole point being is that we cannot have an honest and open conversation and fix what's causing these tensions if we can't talk about facts. It doesn't matter how they portray someone. Facts cannot be racist, okay? Because the same people that argue that, pointing out that, hey, blacks kill, commit homicide at a much higher rate than whites, or you know, immigrants from the third world, namely Africa and the Middle East, use welfare at a much higher rate than the current white and Asian population, and people say, "Oh, that's racist," but yet you'll point out a similar example of, "Oh, well, charging young men for car insurance must be sexist then," using that same line of thinking. But anyone with the ability to think critically knows that young men are charged more because they're more likely to get in accidents, and they're more likely to get tickets. And that's the same reason why people are skeptical about this kind of stuff, is because immigrants from the third world use a lot more welfare and government services than the average person, which means the only way we can have mass immigration is either to have the government go into massive amounts of debt or to raise taxes. Both of those hurt people that pay taxes, because, well, number one, through inflation, which, like I always mention, inflation hurts the poor the most. And the left claims to care so much about the poor, but yet they want massive amounts of inflation, which hurts the poor. Which, again, this is just another one of the millionth ranked contradictions of the left. Um, and then obviously, if you're working, you don't want your taxes raised, because if you're anywhere above the even if you're middle class, but especially if you make anything more than a median income, you're already more than likely, unless you're super unhealthy, you're more than likely putting way more into the system than you're getting out. And to have mass immigration, that number's going to have to be even more unfair. And it's crazy. And I wanted to make a video about this because this is the road Canada's going down. It's going to get worse before it gets better, and like I always mention, they do this kind of stuff incrementally. Governments don't go from being a perfectly free country to a totalitarian nightmare overnight. Maybe that's happened before. I mean, I'm not an expert on history when it comes to that kind of stuff, but it rarely happens. Like I say, it rarely happens, and there's usually other things that cause it. Like in the famous example of Hitler, he came to power mainly because the Treaty of Versailles was one of the main reasons. Um, in that they put massive amounts of sanction, basically crippling sanctions on Germany, and when Hitler was elected, it was either him or more of the same, and people voted for Hitler, which at the time didn't seem that radical. Obviously, looking back, was extremely radical and crazy and abhorrent what he did. But this is what happens too, and looking back on it, people think that, hey, that was crazy. How could people have fallen for that kind of stuff? Well, it's because it happens slowly but surely, and they lull you into a sense of security, and they take it step by step by step by step, and they keep doing it, and eventually you've gone too far. You can't fight back, and that's kind of where we're at in Canada. So I wanted to make a video about this because if we're at the point to where someone can't talk openly about facts, these are government stats too. These are put up by StatsCan. It's not like you can argue that they're biased even, and yet you're still considered as crazy. And this kind of stuff's more than likely going to be censored at some point. So um, anyway, I'm going to leave it there. If you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and check out my PayPal. You can donate there too if you want. I'd really appreciate it. And stay tuned for more videos.